What's up, everyone? Today we're talking about Jamaica, the island that gave the world reggae music, Bob Marley, and one of the most legendary cannabis strains ever grown. We're talking about lamb's bread. But this story isn't just about a strain. It's about how the United States government deliberately destroyed Jamaica's cannabis economy and accidentally created one of the most violent drug gangs in American history. If you're new to this channel, this is where I cover the history of cannabis, including the strains, the people, and the stories that shaped the entire industry. Hit subscribe, and let's get into it. So let's start with how cannabis even got to Jamaica in the first place. It actually came from India in the 1850s and 1860s. After slavery was abolished, plantation owners brought in workers from the Bengal region, which is now Bangladesh and West Bengal. And those workers, they brought cannabis with them. The vocabulary tells the whole story. The word Ganja comes from the Hindi and Sanskrit. Even the conceptual framework of cannabis as a sacred plant traveled with those laborers. For 170 years, Jamaican farmers cultivated it on the island. Volcanic soil, tropical humidity, long growing seasons under the intense equatorial sun. They developed strains that were completely unique to the island. These were landrace strains, and the most famous of them was lamb's bread. Now, lamb's bread, also called lamb's breath, was a sativa with bright green color, dense resin coverage, and a clean, cerebral high. Energetic, uplifting, introspective. And the name itself, it's contested. Some Rastafarian elders say it refers to the soft texture. Others link it to the lamb of the biblical reference and the breath of spiritual life. And that brings us to Rastafari. Rastafari is a religion that emerged in Jamaica in the 1930s among poor, disenfranchised communities. To Rastafarians, cannabis isn't recreational. It's a sacrament. It's the holy herb, the wisdom weed. Smoking it is a spiritual act that opens the mind to Jah. Bob Marley wasn't smoking for fun. He was practicing his religion. He grew his own cannabis in St. Anne's Parish, treated the plant with reverence, and smoked it daily and openly because it was an act of faith. Now here's where things get really interesting. By the early 1970s, Jamaican cannabis was reaching American shores at scale. And at the same time, Bob Marley and the Wailers were touring the United States. The music and the cannabis arrived together. Each one amplified the other. Reggae carried Rastafarian theology directly in American homes. It carried the spiritual relationship with cannabis. The plant wasn't incidental to the worldview. It was central to it. Eric Clapton's cover of I Shot the Sheriff hit American radio in 1974. From there, Marley's albums took off. Catch a Fire, Burnin', Rastaman Vibration, Exodus. In 1978, he released an album called Kaya, which is Jamaican slang for cannabis. Bob Marley supported legalization publicly. He smoked in photographs. He never tried to hide his relationship with the plant. By the time he died in 1981, Jamaican cannabis was no longer just a commodity. It was a cultural symbol. Which brings us to Peter Tosh. Tosh released his solo debut album in 1976. The title track was Legalize It. This was arguably the first major commercial recording to advocate directly for cannabis legalization. He smoked openly at his concerts. He gave pro-legalization speeches. At the 1978 One Love Peace concert in Kingston, he lectured the Prime Minister of Jamaica directly from the stage about cannabis laws. In September 1987, Tosh was murdered in a home invasion in Kingston. One person was convicted, but there were likely some others who were involved. To date, his murder has never fully been solved. Now let's talk about how Jamaican cannabis actually got to America. The route went from Jamaica north to Florida, about 500 to 600 miles across the Caribbean. Motherships loaded with cannabis would sail to international waters. Smaller, faster boats would meet them and run the cargo into the Florida Keys. The Keys were the primary landing zone. Marathon, Key West, bales of cannabis would wash ashore so often that locals just considered it part of life. Once the cannabis was in Florida, it moved through Miami, then up to New York, specifically the Bronx and Brooklyn, which had large Jamaican immigrant communities. The whole distribution network was built on diaspora connections. Someone had a cousin in Kingston. Someone else had an uncle running the boat. There was a neighbor in the Bronx handling distribution. It was all cooperative. It was neighborhood commerce, but not yet a cartel structure. Then the United States government came in and destroyed all of it. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, this was Cold War politics. Jamaica had two main political parties. First, there was the People's National Party, led by Michael Manley. He was pursuing democratic socialism and getting close with Cuba. And there was the Jamaican Labour Party, led by Edward Seaga, who was an anti-communist. Naturally, the U.S. government backed the Labour Party. In exchange, the Labour Party agreed to cooperate with American drug enforcement. That meant destroying Jamaica's cannabis economy. The eradication campaign was carried out with American support. Helicopters, technical assistance, chemical herbicides that wiped out cannabis crops and sometimes legal crops alongside them. For rural Jamaican communities, Ganja was a major source of income. When the United States destroyed it, they removed the economic foundation of those communities. So what filled the vacuum? Cocaine. And that cocaine was distributed by an organization called the Shower Posse. The Shower Posse was founded around 1981 in Tivoli Gardens, Kingston, by a guy named Lester Lloyd Coke. He went by Jim Brown, and another person named Vivian Blake. Coke had been the chief political enforcer for the Jamaican Labour Party, the party that the United States was supporting. In 1989, a former Shower Posse member named Charles Miller testified in federal court. He said the CIA had provided the gang with, quote, arms, training, and transport to the United States. He told the court, quote, the United States made me what I am. Now this allegation comes from one gang member's testimony, and it has never been officially confirmed. But it does fit a documented pattern of Cold War American intelligence operations that prioritize anti-communism over drug enforcement. What we know for certain is the chain of events. The U.S. supported the Labour Party. The Labour Party destroyed Jamaica's cannabis economy. The destruction created a vacuum, and the Shower Posse filled that vacuum with crack cocaine. The Shower Posse went on to become one of the most violent drug trafficking organizations in American history. They operated in Miami, New York, Kansas City, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles. Now here's the part that should make you think. This is the same pattern we see over and over again. Operation Intercept suppressed Mexican cannabis and expanded the Thai market. The DEA's pressure on Colombia made cocaine the rational alternative. The Ganja eradication in Jamaica built the Shower Posse. In every case, the United States government targeted cannabis. Cannabis was the safest of all illegal drugs, and every time they crushed a cannabis economy, something far more dangerous filled the vacuum. The Shower Posse came into existence in Jamaica because the United States government destroyed ganja farming on the island. And that's the story of Jamaica. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more cannabis history content. I drop new videos every week or so on the strains, the people, and the stories that shape this whole industry. And if you want to go deeper, check out my book, Cannabis Lore. I cover Jamaica and a bunch of other stories in a lot more detail. Links in the description. Thanks for watching.